Good Gunpla, bad Gunpla. That is only the selfish perception of people. Truly skilled Gunpla builders should try to win with their favorites. But sometimes Bandai releases a model kit that is just objectively bad, no matter how you look at it. So today, I wanted to have a look at those, brought to you by Vivian Blue, the otaku-oriented online store where you can buy some good Gunpla. And by using the code Kakarot, you'll not just get a 5% discount on your first purchase there, but you'll also be supporting the channel. For our bad Gunpla then, there are two stipulations that I want to make. First and foremost, they had to be bad relative to the time that they were released in. For example, by today's standards, the first master grades kinda suck, but back in the day, they were amazing. And secondly, the flaws have to be inherent to the Gunpla itself, and not because of any third-party interference or lack of ability. In other words, you won't find the real Grade Zeta Gundam on this list. So without any further ado, let's go back to the 90s with two infamously bad 1/144 scales. Introducing the GPO-1 and GPO-2 from Gundam 0083. Both released in 1991. But of the two, you can immediately tell that the GPO-2 is the worst of the two because they couldn't even bother molding the thing in the correct colors.
Oh god, what have you done to my Gundam?
Now, I can understand that it's hard to agree on the exact colors of the GPO-2 because sometimes it's more of an off-white and sometimes it's more of a beige, but I think we can all agree that gray wasn't one of the options. Not even the box or the manuals show it as gray. Weird molding colors aside, the rest of the color accuracy isn't anything to write home about either, and it is worse than the 0080 kits of 2 years prior. And even if you were to paint this thing, it would still suck. The articulation is the shoulder binders don't move at all, and the proportions make it look stubby instead of the towering and menacing giant that it should be. But if you wanted your GPO-2 to look a little bit better, you could buy some grade-up resin kits from B Club. I couldn't find the exact prices for these sets, but considering that they're resin, they couldn't have been cheap, so let's say that you'd end up paying the price of a master grade for a slightly upgraded no-grade kit that was still fundamentally flawed at its core. Staying in the 90s then, we get a kit that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, perhaps for good reason. The 1/44 scale high-grade fighting action Tallgeese 3. A kit that I was considering getting at one point because of how awesome the box looked, but then I saw what was inside of the box. It is a straight-up remold of the standard Tallgeese from the original 1/44 scale Gundam Wing no-grade line. A line that was known for being not that great. Color separation was, articulation was present, and proportions were varying. For 1995 they were fair enough, but the high-grade fighting action Endless Waltz kits had significantly upped the game. They had much sleeker proportions, better color separation, and even extra accessories for better articulation. Simply put, the Tallgeese 3 felt extremely outdated compared to the rest. And this wasn't helped by the fact that it was molded completely in white, with the only touches of color coming from the stickers. The only quote-unquote positive thing that I can say about this kit is that it also comes with parts for the Tallgeese 1 and 2, so at least that's something, I guess. Which is not something I can say for our next remold, the high-grade Universal Century Tristan. Now, Bandai reusing older model kits is something that is fairly common, and in most cases, I don't mind this. Especially not when the model kit that is being reused is an amazing kit. Think, for example, the Master Grade Zaku 2 2.0 and the ARC-78-2 version 2.0. I'll never get tired of kits using those inner frames. But it is a completely different story when Bandai instead decides to use a kit that aged like fine milk. For years now, people have been begging Bandai for an upgrade to the 2004 high-grade Universal Century NT1 Alex because it really does not live up to today's standards. Personally, I love the proportions of this kit, but the articulation feels extremely dated. Worse yet for our little Alex, I consider this kit to be somewhat of a turning point in the high-grade Universal Century line. A point where we go from kits that feel distinctly old, like for example the Gym Command, the Zagok E, and the old Zaku 2s, to kits that feel significantly more modern, like the Hazels, the Zaku 1, and the Power Gym. And unfortunately, the Alex was decidedly in the old-feeling camp. So when I first saw the images of the high-grade Tristan popping up, I and many others thought that the Tristan was going to be a brand new kit whose parts could then be later on used for an upgraded Alex. Because come on, there was no way Bandai was going to reuse parts from an average 2004 high grade for a 2017 high grade for a main Gundam. Well, the joke was on us, because not only did they reuse parts from the 2004 Alex, but even the new parts felt like they came straight out of 2004. And to make matters worse yet, there's quite a few older high grades that completely blow the Alex, and by extension the Tristan, out of the water. Like one of my personal favorites, the original high grade Mark II from 2002. Unfortunately though, reusing parts from a good kit does not automatically mean that the result will be good as well. And I'm sure a lot of people know where I'm going with this. Released in 2012, the real grade Gundam Mark II was long considered to be one of the best real grades out there. It managed to combine the level of detail that the real grades were known for with a level of stability that the real grades weren't known for. Their inner frames were shaky, and they had a lot of parts that would fall off if you so much as looked at them. But not the Mark II. Both the build and the inner frame were very solid for being a real grade. So it stands to reason that Bandai would want to reuse this inner frame. Unfortunately, they reused it on the Sinanju, a machine that's not just much bulkier, but also significantly larger than the Mark II. As a result, the inner frame is hanging on for dear life, but somehow mostly manages. And we also have a railgrade that is strangely difficult to pose, because Bandai of course had to MacGyver the inner frame to fit the proportions of the Sinanju. And unfortunately, Bandai would not learn from this mistake, because in 2024 they released a railgrade that has potentially one of the largest preventable design flaws I've seen in a very long time. Like I just said, railgrades that were released before the Mark II, and even a lot that were released after the Mark II, were known for being flimsy. On top of that, their proportions were also pretty thin. So, these frames were already struggling with not a lot of weight on them. So when Bandai then announced that they were going to be releasing the railgrade Akatsuki Gundam, I thought that there would be no way Bandai was going to be reusing the inner frame from the Strike Gundam. Not only did the Akatsuki have bulkier armor, but the parts were also plated, making them ever so slightly heavier. Something that might not sound like a big deal when looking at individual parts, but it all adds up. So when it was revealed that the railgrade Akatsuki was going to be using the old Strike's inner frame, I wasn't the slightest bit surprised when videos surfaced of its legs losing the fight against gravity. And to add insult to injury, third-party Gunpla makers then rushed to bring conversion kits to market to fix Bandai's shoddy job. Before we get to our final WORST Gunpla then, I wanted to give some dishonorable mentions, because sometimes it's not just the individual Gunpla that's bad, it's the entire line that sucks. With the release of Gundam Seed, one of Bandai's big goals was to bring new people into the Gundam fandom, and by extension, to get new people into Gunpla. And to do this, Gundam Seed kits would be available in a variety of grades, going from expensive to cheap, going from high quality to low quality. Introducing the Gundam Seed No Grade line. The cheapest kits of the line retailed for only 300 yen, making them the same price as the kits from the original Gundam that were released in the early 80s. So technically speaking, these seed kits were even cheaper if we are accounting for inflation, making them the cheapest Gunpla kits ever. And they were also the cheapest in terms of construction. Color separation was kept to an absolute minimum, proportions were not ideal, with chunky mobile suits and thin accessories, and the articulation was almost non-existent, with most kits only having 7 points of articulation. And I will never forget looking at the box of the no-grade Aegis, seeing 7 points of articulation like listed as a feature, and just being confused because my Gundam Wing kits had much more points of articulation, so maybe I just didn't understand what a point of articulation was. After I brought it home then for 20 euros, this confusion was changed to disappointment and anger. Another infamously bad line is the 1/144th scale limited model line from the mid-90s. I'm sure that the grade refers to the fact that these kits were only released in limited quantities, but everything else about them was equally limited. Their articulation was limited, their quality was limited, the colors of the runners were limited to 1, and they required glue. At the same time though, I also can't be too mad at this line, because the idea behind it was to give lesser known machines a model kit, and while some of the limited kits have gotten a modern version, others haven't, so at the very least, it is better than nothing. And then finally, the model kit that has haunted many a Gunpla builder's nightmares, the high-grade Build Fighter Super Fumina. Most of the kit is totally serviceable and your typical Bandai fare, but something went horribly wrong with the sculpt of the face. Whether it's the dead eyes, the menacing mouth, or the overall weird shape, it comes together to form something that is extremely uncanny, and simply painting it isn't going to get rid of this uncanniness. Even the promotional images look demonic. They're supposed to appeal to you, not curse you. But fortunately, this is one case where Bandai has really learned from their mistakes. It took them a little bit of time to really start improving on the faces, but once they got it right, they got it really right. And with that high note, we have come to the end of my list of the worst Gunpla. So let me know down below what the worst Gunpla you've ever heard about is, or have unfortunately ever built. And if you want to have a closer look at all of these bad Gunpla, and perhaps also some good Gunpla, then I would suggest heading over to dalong.net, where you can find pictures and reviews of almost every Gunpla in existence. Also, don't forget to check out Vivian Blue with the code Kakarot. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great evening, and I'll see you all next time.